Well, good morning. It certainly can't be said everywhere you go, but it can be here, is that you all sing very well. I enjoyed that, and I know most importantly God did. Josh has just been one of my best friends. We talk at least every week, and sometimes once a day, some weeks, just depending on what world's problems we have to solve. But we've been good friends. I appreciate him. He does a good work. I know that you treat him well, and hope you continue to do so. He's well worth it. Thank you for the invitation to be here. We have thoroughly enjoyed ourselves up to this point, and just excited about the rest of the day that awaits. Let's go ahead and open up to James chapter 4. James chapter 4. That's where we will be spending our time this morning, and I'll do my best to finish in a timely manner, to go and to eat and enjoy that time together. But while we have this time, let's center and focus in. Where do wars and fighting come from? Why do we have to have wars and fighting? I can't think of a bigger way to start the conversation off with a bang than like this. Perhaps the mother is sitting there at the service, tears just streaming down her face as she tries to gather herself and get herself together, as her son lay there in that casket, and she cries, "Why do we have wars? Why do we have fighting?" Many years have been spent analyzing the different reasons behind wars and why they happen. Is it because of land? Is that what it's about? Is it about power? Maybe it's about wealth. What is it that causes these wars? I want to begin in verse 1 of James chapter 4 and read through verse 4 if you'd like to follow along with me. What causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? You desire and do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. You adulterous people, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. Wars and fighting, they come from within. They come from within. It's our passions that war within us. The lust for power, the lust for pleasure, the lust to go and obtain and get more stuff. You get a group of people together with all the lust that they have. It should not be any surprise that war, that fighting is on the horizon. James, he's not trying to focus on wars, though, in the general sense. He is focusing on wars that take place much, much closer to home. He wants to know where these wars come from within you, among you. His greatest concern is wars that causes these fights among the people that wear the name Christian. Why is that happening? Why is that going on? We have the wars of truth that unfortunately from time to time is necessary to take the stand, to do these things. But there are battles that are of much less worthy motivation. I started this project. I put a lot into it. I've invested in it. In fact, I love it. The war of my pet project got defeated. They won't let me teach. I want to teach. I've been asking to teach for a long time. The war of they won't let me teach. He was my favorite. I liked him a lot. We spent a lot of time together. He talked like I wanted him to. He did and lived his life the way I think that he should. He was my favorite preacher. War. All these different wars against nations, that's a tragedy, a terrible, terrible thing. But I want you to know that the civil war that takes place between the Christians from time to time, unfortunately, is even worse. James, he wants to get to the heart of what produces these wars and these fightings. His main thrust is this: what is my attitude toward the world? What is my attitude toward the world? But why is his focus there? Well, because my attitude toward the world, how I view the world, how I look at the world, what I think about the world, that results and overflows into the church and into the individual life of each Christian. It does. Verses 1 and 4 discusses the different wars. War with God. War with others, especially those in the church, and even this, war with self. War with self. But what harm is worldliness? Is it really all that bad? I know we talk about it, we spend a lot of time, but a little bit of worldliness really isn't bad, is it? Well, when we look at verse 4, let's see what it has to say. It says this, is that it hurts the cause of God. Worldliness does that. I do not know, and I won't ask you to, but I would not imagine that there would be a single person here today that if the question would ask, that they would raise their hand and say yes to, if I stand before God, would I want Him to say to me, you hindered my cause? Because the way you lived, because the way you thought, because the way you behaved, you hindered it. You caused damage to it. You hurt my cause. How hurtful it must be for those that are to be children of God. And I take them and I sit them beside the world and I can't tell any difference. Those of you that have children, do you know why you love them so much? Because they're yours. Because they are not like everybody else's child. I have 2 daughters, 1 son. I tell my son, he's the best son in the whole world. If you have a son, I'm sure you told him the same. Can't say that about my daughter. I can tell her she's my favorite 2-year-old and so on and so forth. But I say that when I sit them down beside other children, I have expectations. I do not want them to look like all the other children that are sitting beside them. How do you think the Heavenly Father, when He looks down and He sees His children, and there we are sitting on the bench together, and He can't find us? Because we look just like them. We're acting just like them. Worldliness hurts the church. I'm so thankful for this, and I think it's happening more and more and more, and hopefully that will bring some cheer and some joy to you. People get dissatisfied with what the world has to offer. After they fell down in that hole enough times, eventually some of them rise up and say, enough is enough. And they work their way into the church. And so they come and they get here, and when they get here, they have the expectation to find something different, but it's unfortunate when they walk in through those doors and they just find more of the world. More of the world. Worldliness hurts the individual. We talked about this some in our morning class, but worldliness, it will condemn my soul. I believe that if we examined hell, thought of it the way that God intended us to, is that when we heard that, we would not be able to go to sleep at night if we fell into that category. It should be that terrifying, that frightening, that sobering, and that realistic. There's been debate as to what worldliness he's referring to here in our context, but in the proper context, this is what it means. I take these things that I have here, and God is here, and I take these things that I have here, and I elevate them above God. I elevate these things that I have, whatever they may be, and I place them above God. What do you think about when you hear this phrase? That's a worldly person. That's a worldly person. We typically think of a person that goes and engages in immoral acts, don't we? That's usually the picture that comes to mind. But the reality is this. That I may never engage in those immoral acts. I may not go out to the bars and to the club and associate and do all those kinds of things, but I'm just as worldly. What, you got to be kidding me? I don't do those things. How could I be just as worldly? Because of what turns over in here. Because my mindset is no different than theirs. I do not have to do the same acts they do to be the same person. It begins up here. It's my mindset towards the world and how I view it. It's hard to not be overwhelmed by the world that we live in, isn't it? It's just so convenient. It's so tangible. It's right there in front of us all the time. It comes into our homes. Problem is this, is that I get so involved in the world, the things that it has to offer, and I let God slide to second place. I want you to know that the day that God comes in second place is the day that He comes in last place. God doesn't play second place. These corporate companies, they have created more atheists than any of the people that study atheism their entire lives. You think, how is that? How could that be? One goes and simply presents their thoughts, the things that they have studied and looked at. The other is just giving them something to occupy their time. Something to cause them to forget about God. Something to cause them to allow God to shift into second place. See, worldliness is so dangerous because often we do not recognize it. When we speak of worldliness, we need to understand that we are talking about immorality. That does fit in there, but is not limited to that. We're also discussing the general attitude towards the world that surely destroys. We sing a song oftentimes, "This world is not my home, I'm just a passing through. My treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue." I hope that we do not sing that song and not mean every word of it. This is not our home. We're just passing through. It wasn't meant to be our home. It never can replace it. First few verses, we learn the cause of worldliness. We've already read verses 1 through 4. I want to add in verse 5 here for our text. It says, "Or do you suppose it is to no purpose that the Scripture says, He yearns jealousy over the Spirit that He has made to dwell in us?" There is an individual in verses 1 through 4 that's talked about more than anybody else. In fact, they're mentioned 14 times, give or take, which translation you have. Do you know who that is? Me. Me. 14 times in 4 verses it talks about me. It talks about us. It talks about you. So here's the key. If you want to be worldly, that's the desire that you have, all you need to do is this: elevate self. That's it. You don't have to go out and kill anybody. You don't have to go out and just commit the worst crimes ever. No, if you want to be considered worldly, take self and elevate them. Just start wanting things for self. Living for pleasure is the idea that we need to take away here. Sad. So sad. But people go and take their soul and lay it on the table and slide it across like an exchange of money and receive back short-term pleasure. Is that what my soul is worth? Is that it? Just pleasure? Is that why the Son of God went to the cross, so I could experience pleasure? It's far more valuable than that. I'm just selling myself short. We live for these unlawful desires. We're jealous of the things that people have. It's the image. Person that's completely selfish. They're not concerned about others. They're not concerned about God. They're looking out for number one. They want what they want. Start elevating myself above God, verse 2. How does a worldly person go about satisfying their desires? A selfish person? Let me tell you, they'll do it by any means necessary. Any means necessary. He says here, you murder, you fight, you war. There is a selfish person that you know that, excuse me, that you have in your own life. And you dare to go and put yourself in between them and whatever it is that they want. Come back and report back, and we'll do a study, we'll do a lab test, and you tell me what it is that they were not willing to do to get you out of the way to get to what it is that they want. There isn't anything. Because that is the nature of the selfish person. They will cut down anybody that stands between them and what they want. How do they get to that point? Leaving God out of my plans. You mean it's that simple? It's that small? I left God out of my plans. That's how I got to that point. When I went on vacation, I didn't pack clothes to go to church. Why? I left God out of my plans. It's not in my plans this week. I'm on vacation. Well, maybe I didn't do that, but God, He's in my plans, but He's really the A. Not the A, but the B. Well, not the B, He's really the C. He's the C plan. C plan. I got some other things in between A and B there. Why do that? Why trust in self? We're not even able to change the weather. What makes me think that I need to rely on self? Why not trust in God, the Creator of it all? Oh, I know. You don't have because you do not ask. Prayer is more important than power. Verse 3. All I need to do to be worldly is to think about self when I pray. That's it. All I need to do to be worldly is think about self in my prayers. You ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly. Oh yes, I did. I did ask. I asked for the raise. I asked for the bigger house. I asked for the nicer car. I asked for the vacation home. I asked. James says, yep, you did. You did ask. But when you were out and you were asking for all those things, you had all the wrong motives. Your motives were completely out of whack. Sometimes when we pray, it's unfortunate, but I believe we pray like this: Lord, allow my will to be done and not thine. Because everything about that prayer was about me getting what I want and nothing else. And that was it. We approach God like many of us do and did our grandfathers, with an open hand just waiting to extend and give us whatever it is that we want. These prayers, self-centered, not concerned with others, doesn't even begin to think about the will of God. I want what I want, and I'm going to do what I have to do to fulfill my desires. To be more worldly, I just need self to be deceived by the world. Verse 4. Adultery. It is severely condemned throughout the Bible. Over and over and over again, 1 Corinthians 6, 10 and 18. Here's James. His focus is not on this physical adultery. He is writing to the members of the church. And as members of the church, we need to know and live like and understand that we are the bride of Christ. 2 Corinthians 11:2. So when the bride of Christ is unfaithful to Him, how do you think He feels? How does He take that? It's a slap in the face to God. We have just committed spiritual adultery. When we become Christians, we've got to live like the body of Christ. I've made a vow to be faithful to Him. I do not need to find myself going and committing adultery with the world. I can't afford to do that. I want you to know physical adultery, spiritual adultery, is cut from the same cloth. Comes from the same place. Self. Self. What is it? What is it that made these recipients of this letter in James chapter 4 unfaithful? They had centered their affections on the world rather than on God. That's what they did. In verse 4, James, he takes God and he places Him on this side here. And then he takes the world, places them on this side here. The two, they are diametrically opposed. They are completely and utterly opposed. You can't love them both unless you're talking to Satan. You see, Satan has no problem with a divided loyalty. You know why? Because a divided loyalty is just as useful as disloyalty is. Because in Matthew 6 and verse 24, we know that God teaches we either choose Him or we choose the world. We choose Him or we choose Satan. Satan doesn't care if you do both, because he wins either way. We know that most of the time, people don't go from being the best spouse in the world, the most faithful person that there is, doing everything that they can do for their spouse, jumping straight into adultery. It typically does not happen that way. It's not a big jump like that. It happens the way that James is describing here in James chapter 4. Small steps. Small steps. An ill-advised friendship that led to that adultery. So when I go over here and I think, well, I'm just going to be a friend to the world. Step here, adultery. It's that quick. It's that simple. It's that hidden. We want to flirt with the world. We want to be friendly. We don't want to go over the line. So, we attend worldly things. Not to participate. We're just going to watch. We're just going to watch this program. We're not going to be a part of it. We listen to worldly music. Talks about drinking and cursing and cheating on my spouse and all these other things. And we think, well, it doesn't really affect me. And they continue down this path and they begin to ask, they say, what's the matter? What's the matter? Don't you trust me? Trying to be a friend to the world, it's like trying to be a friend to that snake. He may not bite you today. One day he will. And then it might be too late. Have you ever known someone it was just the most faithful person that you had been around? You thought that they hung the moon when it came to things inside the church. And then it appeared that overnight, they just abandoned God. They left the faith. They quit coming to services. Did they lose their minds? Kind of. But they allowed the loss to take place. They allowed it to happen. It really did not happen overnight. Slowly but surely, this person was having their thoughts programmed with worldly things, worldly values, worldly attitudes. And who knows how long they had been doing that? Till they just resolved and said, well, I might as well just be a friend of the world. Don't go anywhere. It's not all doom and gloom. Thankfully, there is a cure. Verse 6, if you would, please. He gives more grace, therefore, it says. God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Be wretched and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned into mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you. It's true. We serve a jealous God. And he demands obedience and faithfulness from his bride, verse 5. So how do I do that? How can I be faithful? Or if I've been unfaithful, how do I get back over there? And we need to realize we need to not kid ourselves. The people that find themselves there in adultery hopefully can seek reconciliation if at all possible. But we would be kidding ourselves if we said that reconciliation wasn't going to take a lot of work, a lot of steps, a lot of effort to be put in. So how do I do that? Well, verse 6 begins and it says this, accept the grace of God. I'm so glad that verse is right there. If we had only our own strength to rely on in this situation, it would seem hopeless. It would be hopeless. What do we have there? The grace of God. It is through grace that we are initially saved. Ephesians 2 and verse 8. So once I become a Christian, the need for God's grace, it ceases, right? No. No, it doesn't. We need His grace in order to stay saved. Hebrews 4 and verse 16. God, He extends grace to us so abundantly. But then James, he quotes from Proverbs 3 and verse 34. He said this, God opposes the proud, but He gives grace to the humble. Such a well-known passage. One you've probably heard numerous times. Notice this in that. It is that God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. The way that sentence is set up, it means that I have to qualify for it. I don't just get it. I can't just sign up. I have to qualify for it. He resists the proud, the self-sufficient. But He gives grace to who? To the humble. I want to qualify for God's grace. I got to be humble. I need to be humble. The ones that recognize and understand and know their need for God. We can be faithful to God by being obedient. Verse 7. Don't lose this little small point here. Do you know what the result of humility is? James tells us that it's submission to God. That's the result of humility. It is submission to God. We've got to understand our rank. If we are a buck private, we have no business acting like we are the general. We must stay humble. God, He's our spiritual commander-in-chief. Let us submit to Him. Obey without question. One of the most important things about submission is this: determining whose side are you on. Whose side are we on? He does not just say this: submit yourselves to God. Does He just say that? Submit yourselves to God, cuts it off, end of verse, it's done. Is that what He says? No. Submit yourselves to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. You see, it is not enough. People think, well, I don't curse, I don't drink anymore, I don't go those places I didn't have any business going. That's good. That's great. That's half the battle. That's all it is. Half. I cannot take these things that were in my life, that were bad, get them out of my life, and not replace them with the things of God. It's so much more than just refraining from something. I've got to put something back in there in its place. I've got to choose. The word resist, it's not a reactive term. I hope we understand that. So many times we are reactive beings. This is an active thing. It's a proactive term. If you actively oppose the devil, then he'll flee from you. So maybe if I'm sitting here thinking, well, I've tried to flee from the devil and he just catches me every time. Well, maybe I'm not being proactively in my fleeing. I can't wait till he walks up, knocks on the door, and has one foot inside and is sitting there talking to me to decide I'm about to resist the devil. It's a proactive thing. It doesn't stop. You can remain faithful to God by becoming more like Him. Verse 8. What a promise to have that our God as our personal companion. I hope that excites you. I hope that brings you joy, that God cares about us that much. I have to know that this is conditioned, though. Conditioned on drawing near to Him. How do I do that? Well, I want to give you a couple of practical things here. Follow your Bible. Don't put it under your arm. Don't set it on the dash of the car. Don't put it on your coffee table. You have got to open this thing up and you've got to read it. And you can't just read it, but you've got to study it. And you can't just study it, but you need to make a list of the things that you read and that you're supposed to be doing, and you need to apply these things. Follow your Bible. Why would we begin anywhere else? When you fall short, repent. I am so amazed that people will not come and sit down here on these front two pews because they're afraid of what the ones that will be standing behind them are going to think, and they do not think about what God thinks. I don't understand that. If I got sin in my life, I don't care if the entire United States has to watch me walk down this aisle, because I know God expects it and demands it of me. I want that sin gone from my life. Repent. Come to God in prayer. I hear some people say this, and well-intended people, all we can do is pray. That's everything that we can do. God picks up where the doctor's hands stop. We need to believe in the power of prayer. In every way, I've got to become more like God. So how do I draw nigh to God? Draw near to God. Let me tell you, I will never, ever, ever draw near to God if I'm not trying to become more like Him. Never. I have got to try each and every day that I draw a breath inside my body to be more like Him if I'm going to draw near to Him. We have things in common. His thoughts that we know from right here, they become my own. I view the world in the same way. It's going to require some cleaning then, inwardly, outwardly. Verse 8, hands on the outside, hearts on the inside. We do this by setting our hearts on God, doing His will, Colossians 3 and verse 2, obeying from the heart, Romans 6 and verse 17, being baptized to walk in a newness of life, Romans 6, 3 and 4, and repenting of sin, Acts 8 and verse 22. Strive constantly to be more like God in thought and deed, in everyday life. Serve Him. Draw near to Him. Finally, we've got to humble ourselves before God, verses 9 and 10. We looked at this here. We talked about the tongue this morning. There were some hard-hitting things in there that we had to conquer. We looked at chapter 4 here, and all the way up to verse 6. Again, we're facing some really hard things from James. Does he just not want us to be happy? Is that what it is? Well, no. You flip over a chapter in chapter 5 and verse 13, and you find he's talking about being merry. James wants us to understand that we can forget about being happy if we can't get these things. It may hurt a little bit. It may not be the funnest thing we've ever done, but it's necessary. There's a time to weep, and there's a time to laugh. I enjoy laughing. In fact, I probably enjoy laughing more than most people do. Morgan made fun of my laughing last night. I enjoy laughing. But you know, sometimes it's just not time to laugh. It's time to weep. It's time to weep. When should I weep? When I look over, I see somebody I love more than anything. And they're in sin. And they're lost. If they don't come back to God, they're going to be just like the rest of the world. When I look into my own life, I don't think it's funny anymore. Things that I did, I don't just brush it off. I realize that sin, it's like a cancer. It spreads. It grows. But God's given me the cure. How many of us here today, diagnosed with cancer, standing there before the doctor, and the doctor comes in, he says, hey, I have bad news. You have cancer. And it is going to end your life. But the good news is this, is I have this pill. You can take it and you'll never have it again. How many of you would sit there and say, well, let me think about it just a minute? We'd snatch that pill out of that doctor's hand. We wouldn't ask how much it cost or what we have to do next. We'd just start doing. I hope that that's the way we'll live for God. If we want to refrain from this worldly mindset, we'd do well to open up James, look at the things that he has presented here in chapter 4, and understand that living like the world is deadly. It doesn't mean I commit the immoral acts. It's just that I've let the world start living up here, and it's caused me to leave God. If you're here this morning, you've yet to obey the gospel. You can be baptized as they did there in Acts chapter 2. You can have your sins washed away. You can begin that relationship there with Him. But maybe you've done that. You've fallen away. You understand that I've been unfaithful. And I need to start taking those difficult but necessary steps to be right with Him again. I hope that you'll do it. Won't you come while we stand and while we sing?